Coming up on episode 51 of Omnivore, consumer food and beverage trends for 2025, how legacy brands are navigating new product development, and logistical hurdles in the food traceability rule. Happy New Year from Omnivore, from the editors of Food Technology Magazine and the Institute of Food Technologists.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by IFT Membership. Connect with our diverse community and discover a world of new opportunities. Explore the benefits of membership at ift.org/membership.
Welcome to Omnivore from IFT and Food Technology, where we explore the intersection of business, science, and technology in the global food system. I'm Bill McDowell. Want a glimpse at the food and beverage choices that consumers will be making in the new year? So did we. Food Technology's Mary Ellen Kuhn recently spoke with Jenny Zegler, who leads Mintel Food Drink's coverage of food and beverage trends. Zegler describes how consumers are thinking about healthy eating and why they sometimes don't want to think about it at all.
Well, Jenny, anytime you've contributed input about consumer trends, they've always been so on point. So it's really a delight to be able to talk to you today about the consumer outlook. Welcome. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of the anti-obesity medications or the GLP-1 drugs. So Mintel reports, and I found this super interesting, that 12% of U.S. consumers are on these medications. How's that impacting consumers' food and beverage choices, and also how food and beverage manufacturers should be responding to that?
Yeah, it's really incredible to see that, I felt like last fall, the GLP-1 drugs started to take the spotlight. And for some consumers, it might be the miracle cure they've always been hoping for. They have been trying and failing to lose weight over time, maybe their entire lives. And these drugs provide them with a new biological intervention that isn't as extreme as maybe bariatric surgery. One of the other really exciting statistics out of our weight management trends report is in that same question. 21% of U.S. adults have never taken GLP-1 drugs to manage their weight, but are interested in them. And so that's a lot of people who are considering this. They might be hearing the buzz about this. Maybe they know someone who has taken them and they've seen the success that has brought them. And so it's really intriguing a lot of consumers. And I think for food and drink companies, it's not all about targeting these consumers who are interested in them or taking them, or even the people who have stopped taking them, because that's also a sizable group of consumers. It's about giving those same weight management benefits. So portion control, fiber, but we're also seeing new claims like blood sugar management, especially because these drugs were developed to help people with diabetes. And so there's a lot of different benefits, but I think it's really changing the conversation about weight management because it gives consumers a new option with new benefits.
Is that something that's going to be more important to consumers, hearing about the basics, protein, fiber, that kind of thing?
I think it fits with the fact that consumers want that agency to be able to choose what works for them personally. And these basic building blocks, the things we might have learned, in elementary school of you need your fruits and vegetables, you should drink water, you should get, drink milk or get calcium, as well as protein and fiber and different things. We really think that paring things down to the basics is helping people with those choices. Yes, there's people out there who might want functional foods and are all about, the functional mushrooms and the adaptogens and all of that. But for a lot of consumers, the basics of nutrition really helps them figure out what works for them and what they need on a daily basis. So do they need more protein? Do they need more fiber? Do they need to be drinking more water or get more hydration into their diets?
And do you think there's an opportunity for companies to emphasize that in their product positioning?
Absolutely. We've seen protein for the last 5 to 10 years just continue to grow. We're now seeing the numeric claims of this has 12 grams of protein, this has 5 grams of protein. And that might help consumers understand because there's more information out there about how much protein you might need. Sometimes it's based on weight, sometimes it's based on your health goals. But also fiber is something that we've recognized in the past 3 to 5 years. We've seen more consumers pay attention to that and and realize that they're not getting what they need and that there's so many different benefits to fiber. So getting those types of claims or just helping people understand that this might be hydrating or it might have a fruit or vegetable serving. It just really helps them build their own diet plan and address the things that they think they need and what might be missing on a daily basis.
Well, I wanted to talk too about one of the Mintel trends called rule rebellion, because that sounds pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing that sometimes consumers want to break the rules,
Mm-hmm.
what opportunities does that create for food and beverage companies?
Rule rebellion is just recognizing the fact that consumers are perfectly imperfect beings and they're going to do things that don't necessarily make sense and they're going to look for treats. And so much of the viral food trends that we've seen in the past few years have really looked at those mashups and just doing things that people don't necessarily expect. And it's all about thinking outside of our normal parameters. I think the coolest thing that I've seen recently in my social media feeds are lasagna recipes that are using completely different ingredients, not Italian ingredients. I saw a Thai curry lasagna. And so that really helps to embody rule rebellion by giving people the freedom to be like, yes, this is something you recognize in the form of a lasagna, but it's entirely different, in different ingredients and could give you that indulgence you're looking for, but in a whole new way.
So another trend that Mintel has identified is called hybrid harvests, and it focuses on the fact that food and beverage companies need to show how technology and agriculture can work together. So that sounded interesting to me because consumers love technology in so many ways, but not necessarily when it comes to their food. So how should food and beverage companies be communicating about that?
This is still a slow evolution. I don't think we're quite there yet. Our hybrid harvest trend builds on a trend that we predicted at the start of 2020. These were our 10-year out 2030 global food and drink trends. And we had a trend called high-tech harvests, where we recognized that we were going to need more technological input in agriculture to help address our population growth, climate change, so many different things. And checking in on that at a 5-year point with our 2025 trends, we really felt that consumers weren't there yet, especially in the United States. There's still that fear of GMOs and other things that we're not quite sure how, if technology should be available. So we think that there's a way in our food supply to really help consumers understand that maybe this is a technology that helps the farmers. Maybe this is something that helps keep the costs down for you, because we know so many consumers are really focused on that now. Maybe this is something that just delivers a better tasting product.
Well, so it's kind of about understanding what it does for you, it seems like.
Yes, and understanding that there can be benefits for you. And I think that's always something that I've said over the years when it comes to genetic modification, that if we take the scary factor out of it, if you think about it personally, if you have a gene that could make yourself personally more susceptible to a disease or to a health condition, wouldn't you consider changing that? And in the food supply, there's a lot of that as well. It's that we are helping make these crops more drought resistant. We're helping them, taste better. There's so many different benefits that technology can help us with. And it doesn't always have to be considered scary or frankenfood. And it's all about explaining, as you said, the benefits to consumers.
Just to kind of wrap things up today, so we're talking, and it's always fun to talk about what's ahead, what's different with the consumer outlook for the year. But I thought maybe to wrap it up, we could talk a little bit about what are the constants? What are some of the things that consumers want in their food and beverage choices that really never change?
Well, we always know that flavor is first and foremost, that people are buying based upon taste, even though a lot of people have been frustrated with the price of their food, especially in the US, that flavor still really drives. And that, I think, is leading that continued desire for indulgence and maybe these crazier and crazier indulgences like we talk about with Mintel's rule rebellion trend. But there's also that need for health. I think we're realizing that more. You're seeing the long-term impacts as more people are understanding our aging population and maybe facing it in yourselves. And so there's still that constant for health. It's just that the definition continues to change and continues to be more personal. So I think one of the constants that we've seen there is definitely protein, Fiber is continuing to be something that more consumers recognize. And I would put hydration in with that as well now that more consumers are recognizing the need to get that better hydration or even to add a supplement with hydration. So those constants, which really our body needs, but I think it's also the fact that our bodies and our brains want those treats. So that room for indulgence, that little bit of wiggle room, whatever that might mean based upon the day, the month, the minute, it's all about giving you that leeway to say, maybe it's been a good day, maybe it's been a bad day, but I deserve a little treat.
Well, that was actually one of the trends we identified in our article that and it sounds like based on what you're saying that was on point, that health and indulgence will coexist.
And they absolutely have to. And I think we all know that as people. We've got healthier indulgence. We've got more indulgent health products. There's a lot of different ways of balancing it. But I think that idea that people still want that agency to say, I've been mostly good. I've eaten all the healthy things. That means I've earned or I deserve this piece of dessert or this little bit of leftover, maybe something cheesy, fried, whatever that indulgence might be for them.
Well, thanks so much for talking trends today.
Yeah, it was so nice to talk with you, Mary Ellen.
Jenny Zegler leads food and drink trends coverage and client outreach for Mintel Food Drink. Learn more about what she and other experts have to say about consumer behavior and its impact on the food and beverage market in the December-January issue of Food Technology. We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment, but first, this word from our sponsor.
IFT is the convener of the global food system. As a member, you'll cultivate your professional network within our global community, stimulate new ideas with the latest research and trends, and accelerate your growth with expert training and resources. Why wait? Visit ift.org/membership to join IFT today.
Welcome back to Omnivore. I'm Bill McDowell. As consumer preferences shift and competition from startups heats up, legacy brands are under pressure to evolve faster than ever. Sally Lyons Wyatt, Executive Vice President at Circana, says that product innovation fueled by advanced consumer insights and AI is revitalizing iconic brands. From leveraging co-branding opportunities to tapping into startups, she explains why innovation is now mission critical for CPG companies and how strategic pivots can make or break legacy players. So the recent food tech article talks a lot about how product development has become such a critical driver of building excitement and maintaining consumer engagement. Why is this particularly important for legacy brands? And has that importance changed over time?
Today, there is such more emphasis on innovation, more so than probably over the past 5 years. So as a reminder, COVID and a couple of years after, we saw a variety of innovation reduced due to supply issues and just trying to get product on the shelf. This coupled with high inflation in 2022 and 23 time periods pushed consumers to shift their mindset in shopping to value-based retailers and accept private label products that had similar quality and or flavors, or even just more so an attractive price. What winning companies have done versus companies that have been struggling, it is all about drilling into the consumer, knowing more, being laser focused on the consumer, knowing more about them than you ever thought you could. There are companies out there that do phenomenal actions to uncover what consumers are indeed looking for, to tap into that with innovative products. And many that do that have had successful wins from volume share and dollar share, which means that for the next few years, if one of the top 3 strategies companies isn't innovation, they will miss the mark.
Product development has always been a game of managing hits and misses, right? So we've got all these data sets now. We've got social media listening. We've got retail scanner, which we've had for decades. We have, the e-commerce data that have all become so important to ideation Now we have these generative AI tools to analyze these massive data sets. So how are brands using some of these tools to anticipate customer needs differently and be more proactive instead of reactive?
I see a lot of different companies doing different things. So, for example, it could be going and using what you just said. It could also be leveraging social and other means to talk with consumers and get their feedback. I've seen it, the gamut of it, that then leveraging AI to come through those conversations, come through what you might have learned to come in with, these are the themes. These are kind of where you should be tapping into. So white space type analyses are very common in our industry, but some of that white space can be determined by some of the new voices in the system where you learn and hear things that maybe tap into something that's not available today, or maybe it's adding something. So companies are doing a variety of tactics. It is important that they continue to monitor and determine if what they're doing is working or not, and then be agile enough to adjust what they're trying to do. But I literally know of a company that went out and mapped consumption occasions, and learned the meaning of what that meant for their target consumers on a day-to-day basis. I've seen others use the artificial intelligence as they are trying to mix flavors. I have seen companies go out and learn and go into and observe actions at different forums, whether that's concerts, whether that's sporting events, whether that's, something that might be more for family fun, like some of these go-kart places and mahjong games and things like that, just variety of different things. And I think that's what's been the magic of innovation, is the tools you talked about, Bill. They're enabling the ideation that was harder to do back in the day, and that enablement is then, in theory, going to allow companies to have more innovative ideas that would drive hopefully more excitement and keep them on the shelf, as retailers have been obviously innovating on their own with their own private brands.
So historically, legacy brands have been pretty risk averse. So what's the net result of this? Is the application of this more on prioritizing smaller incremental innovation? Or is this enabling more disruptive approaches, or is there room for both?
There's definitely room for both, but I will say this. Retailers have done a really nice job with their private brands, and they've been able to penetrate many categories across the store with products that are similar in quality and flavor. And they've gone into tiered pricing themselves. So just as we have value national brands and mainstream and premium, super premium, you now have value and kind of mid-tier and more premium private brands. So for manufacturers, this is the pivoting point to zero in on what you said. Use the combination of both of those levers to drive innovative approaches. It's imperative, because what we looked at this year, and we looked at companies that were having products growing and products that were more getting by. The difference was something that gave consumers a little bit more, maybe more benefits, maybe more flavor combinations, something like that. And because of that, the companies that were winning had a diverse portfolio that included some premium and super premium priced products, versus just, when you said risk averse, it's interesting because the companies that had their iconic brands that they had been, that had been absolutely doing well with consumers for years. Well, private brands have now come in and said, excuse me, I can do the same thing. So this is that moment where national brands do have to lean in and do have to pull as many of the innovative levers as they can, because if they don't, there is that risk that they will have limited distribution as opposed to more of the mainstream distribution.
What's the role of limited time offers in all of this? LTOs, both in retail and food service, have always been a great way to generate buzz and urgency and excitement, but they're also a way to hedge your bets a little bit.
I actually had the honor of facilitating a panel earlier this year, and it was of retailers, and LTOs was the conversation. I said, all right, tell us the skinny. Do you love LTOs or do you really not like them because it's more paperwork? Because I kept thinking, to try and manage that, that's a lot. They said, absolutely bring them because they drive excitement. Companies that come out and do limited time offers that are either holiday based, right? So your Halloween flavors or your Christmas favorites or whatever that might be, themed, even themed based with movies and correlating with the movies and the in and outs with those. So the co-licensing of some of the different events, those types of LTOs that are, get it now, limited time offer, even in food service. And this isn't just retail CPG, in food service too. It's the same idea. Those operators and the retailers love to have them. And I think if it's something, if you can get to where it is a consumer favorite that they want every year, that's the utopia of an LTO.
How do startups play into this and the pressure from startups? Because we've got so many emerging brands, particularly in areas like health and wellness, sort of the better for you food product categories, sustainability, things like that. How do those startups drive where the ideation focus is for some of the more established brands?
There are some big manufacturers that do invest in some of these startups through different means in which they do it. And they do so in hopes that those startups will come up with some ideas that their own teams may not have that same visibility. Different perspectives provide an enormous amount of wealth of knowledge. It's really difficult to come up with every product possible that you could innovate with just a small group of people. So by being able to connect and collaborate with some entrepreneurs or some smaller companies does help the smaller companies, because it infuses them with some cash to help them stay afloat. The biggest difference is that ability to look outside the four walls of what that company is tasked at doing, what it's known for, where its equity is, where the categories they've wanted to play in, the occasions they wanted to be part of, whatever that might be. They are focused on that, where the startups have none of that around them. And they have the ability to bring ideas that are very differentiated, fresh, unique, and also don't have all the costs that are already embedded in the big companies to help bring a product to market.
Well, let's talk a little bit about co-branding, because that seems to be a mechanism for legacy brands in some cases to shortcut some of this and be able to maybe take some risks in terms of innovation. So what are some of the risks and rewards, and how do brands navigate those partnerships to make sure that they're protecting their long-term identity?
So when it comes to the co-licensing, the risk is, are you co-licensing with the right company and right product that is going to complement and provide you kind of a net gain on shoppers and or one more product in the basket? So if you don't get that right, then obviously it won't be as successful as the original goals that you had. but the rewards really outweigh the risk, because by bringing different brands, that mashup you talked about, bringing those together, whether it's through flavors, whether it's through form or texture, whatever it might be that's going to bring the two together, it really gets everyone going, oh, I wonder what that's going to taste like, or I wonder how that's going to work, or I wonder if it's going to be as even better and more effective. So curiosity will be the key winner for co-licensing, because people will want to know. It doesn't mean that every one of them are going to be successful, but one thing I can tell you is they will more than likely get you trial, and that's half of the battle, right? So I'm a big proponent of co-licensing, a big proponent of LTOs. I feel like, especially the big and small manufacturers working together, you can bring markets together that might be very unique and different versus what private brands are able to do today. Now, what will be interesting is, will a private brand co-license with a national brand any day in the future? I think it's a possibility. I really do. And that one, I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition, into reality, and seeing what that looks like.
Sally Lyons Wyatt is the Global Executive Vice President and Chief Advisor for Consumer Goods and Food Service Insights at Circana, a global consulting firm that helps brands and retailers use data and analysis to support business decisions and growth. You can read more about how product innovation at legacy brands is evolving in the December-January issue of Food Technology. In just a year, on January 20th, 2026, the compliance deadline for the FDA's Food Traceability Final Rule will be enforced. Aimed at facilitating faster identification and removal of potentially contaminated food and reducing the impact of foodborne illness and death, the rule's intent is universally embraced, but its specifics pose a number of operational and logistical hurdles for companies. Food Technology's Mary Abode chatted with Hilary Thesmar, Chief Science Officer and Senior Vice President of Food Safety at FMI, the Food Industry Association, about these challenges and the need for implementation flexibility.
You're kind of perfectly situated to answer the question of how this rule sort of lands with the food industry. You know, when it comes down, take me back to November 2022, and just kind of what were you hearing and seeing at the time from your constituents or members?
And it actually goes back much further than that.
Sure.
And IFT has a role in that. It really started when the FSMA regulation was, when the bill was actually signed by Congress and President Obama in January of 2011. Okay. So there was a provision numbered 204. So it gave FDA authority for additional record keeping for high-risk foods. Okay. And with that came a couple of things. One was that FDA had to do pilots within, I think it was 18 months or so. FDA contracted with IFT to do the pilots, and that report was submitted to FDA and then was submitted to Congress on behalf of FDA. In 2014, they published a document for information. It was kind of a not a proposed rule. It was just a methodology on how FDA thought they should determine what foods were high-risk foods. So now we're going to fast forward to 2020. Okay. In September of 2020, FDA published the proposed rule. And so that was the proposed rule, which then the final rule was published in November of 2022.
Okay.
Going back to 2020, though, industry was a little busy in September of 2020 because that was COVID. We had supply chain issues. It was challenging with workers being out sick, with taking care of families. So it didn't get as much attention as it would have received had it been either before or after COVID. FMI did submit comments, and then FDA went and reviewed the comments and then wrote a final rule. And that was published in November of 2022. So since then, we've been working with our member companies to figure out how to implement. So, and it has been a challenge.
If you could summarize for me, like the biggest challenges and concerns for companies as they move to comply with the rule.
We've done a lot of work with our members to really drill down into what they are struggling with and then what they can do.
Yes.
There's a lot of existing records in the industry, and most of those records are around payment systems. The payment systems have a lot of information about quantities, products,
Right.
all of that.
Right.
The other systems that have a lot of existing information are the inventory system. So all companies track their inventory. They have to, kind of know how much product and what types of products they're going to be making. So there's a lot of embedded data in those two big categories, inventory and payments.
Yeah.
So if we could base a system around existing data, that would be more practical for the industry. That's not the direction that FDA went, though. The FDA went in a direction that really required new elements. They did use a framework that actually IFT developed years ago, and it was the key data elements and the critical tracking events. So that is the framework. And then they identified the foods on the food traceability list and the records that have to be kept at every critical tracking event. So there's about 4 points that we are there have identified early, but have still kind of been at the top of the list of what the challenges are. And so most importantly, the commitment to food safety is priority number one. We expect the food to be safe when consumers buy it. And if a consumer gets sick, we want to work with the public health officials and find that source as quickly as possible. It's in everybody's best interest to do that. So the challenges are in the details. So let's talk through some of those.
Okay.
The first one is, and this is probably the most complex and also the most nuanced, by requiring the traceability lot code and the traceability lot code source, that forces us to track every case, sometimes even every item. So there might be some stores that receive less than a case of a product. Now we're at the item level. It's an unrealistic requirement that we track to the case level because it forces us to go to a very small unit, but it also increases the amount of data that we have to keep. Because now we're keeping all of those KDEs, key data elements, for every single unit or every single case. Okay. So it raises the amount of data that has to be kept for 2 years. But you also have to capture it somehow. What we asked FDA for is the ability to give them a small range of lot codes. We can tell them, okay, it was one of 3 lot codes. It was one of 5 lot codes. We're just asking for a little bit of leeway on what we can do in terms of records, so we don't have to go to that case or item level. The next one is the scope of the traceability list. Congress told FDA that they had the authority to require additional records on high-risk foods. No food wanted to be labeled as a high-risk food, and I think FDA heard that. So what they did is they developed a food traceability list, and they did use kind of a public health algorithm to determine what foods were on the list and what foods were not. It's a really confusing list, and it's a lot of foods. The third point is we think there's a need for more pilot programs.
Okay.
The IFT pilots were completed in 2012, so 12 years ago. And a lot has changed since then. The pilots were also done not knowing what the rule would look like. So we've never tested the final rule. And we want to test the final rule to see if it's doable, but also most importantly, we want pilots to make sure that FDA can use the information on the back end for solving foodborne illness outbreak investigations. That's never been tested with real data. And then the fourth one is super easy. We just need more time. Even companies that do have are technologically advanced and have great systems in place, the systems still need to be reprogrammed and tested and scaled. So the more time is essential. So asking the food industry, as complex and large as we are on a commodity basis, to implement in 3 years, we think is a little short.
What's the viability of executing this on schedule?
So what our members are telling us, the goal is to comply. I mean, there isn't a company out there that says we just can't do it. We're not going to be in compliance at the deadline. What they're telling us is that they would rather, the computer systems, the warehouse management systems, and inventory systems have a life cycle. And what they'd like to do is have a little more time so that they can phase a technology out and then phase another one in that's going to be as robust as they need it to be. What they're doing now is just patches so that they can kind of make do. So I think they'll get there. We're hoping that we can get an extension. We're hoping that they can give us some flexibilities that would make it easier to meet the intent of the rule. But not what we're saying is we can meet the intent, we can't meet the letter of the law of the rule. And there's also been some conversations with FDA that some of the leadership on their work group that wrote the rule and are implementing the rule have said that we have to be 100% accurate 100% of the time. Wow. That is not realistic. It's not going to happen. So we need a little bit of room. We need some room to try and to experiment and to see what's going to work. Companies will comply with traceability. We just need some flexibility so that it's practical and it doesn't cost us a fortune throughout the entire supply chain to do this. So that's what I hope. I know we will meet the goal, but we really need to do it in a way that is practical, given the challenges the food industry has and the complexity and the global supply chain.
Hilary Thesmar is Chief Science Officer and Senior Vice President of Food Safety at FMI, the Food Industry Association. With over 20 years of experience in food science, food safety, and food and agriculture policy. You can read her dialogue op-ed on the traceability rule in the December-January issue of Food Technology.
Thank you to this episode's sponsor, IFT Membership. Satiate your hunger for knowledge, connection, and career growth with an IFT membership. Discover the benefits and activate yours at ift.org/membership.
And that wraps up this episode of Omnivore. Thanks again to all our guests and my colleagues at Food Technology. Omnivore is produced and distributed by the Institute of Food Technologists. If you enjoyed today's show and want to learn more about Food Technology Magazine or how to join the conversation by becoming an IFT member, visit ift.org/membership. For more in-depth discussion about innovation in the science of food, check out IFT's other podcast, Side Dish, on the News and Publications page of ift.org. If you have comments or suggestions for future shows, just send us an email. The address is editors@ift.org. For the entire team at Food Technology and IFT, I'm Bill McDowell. Thanks for listening, and join us again for our next episode.